welcome back to the first tutorial on my channel in a little while. Today I decided that I would do a tutorial in Photoshop that encompasses more about skincare style imagery and how I would approach with retouching. This is something that is becoming more and more popular amongst beauty photography. Skincare is becoming a very big business, and for those of you who are interested in beauty photography specifically, which I guess quite a few of you are if you're watching my channel, because that is what I'm mainly doing these days, this is going to be more of a tutorial that's centered around that. I think that there's a big difference between retouching a skincare style image and then retouching something that's a bit more editorial style as well, or a bit more creative. So I really want to go through a few points today that are important to remember when you're retouching a skincare style image. Just before we get into this video, I am going to do a little bit of a shameless plug right now and let you guys know that I have actually launched my blog. So if you've been following me on Instagram, you would have seen that I launched it a couple of weeks ago, and it's really exciting because it just gives me another platform to have a conversation with you guys around all things photography, and it's just a really good way to communicate with you guys over there as well. So I have launched that, and you can go and check it out at kayleejuneblog.com, and I will be posting a lot more educational content on there regularly, and if you choose to subscribe to the email list, you will receive a free Photoshop action. So straight on to the tutorial now, and I want to just talk about this image in particular. So this is a skincare style image that was actually shot as a test image. So by that, I mean it was taken on a test shoot, and it was a collaboration between the model and the makeup artist and myself. So we decided to take a few more photos that were skincare style based, and this is more for building portfolio work. If there's ever a point in my business where things are a bit slower or I do have more time on my hands, I will definitely jump into doing a lot more testing, and specifically for portfolio building work and to improve my skills. I do enjoy doing that, and I feel like it's something that most photographers should be doing. So as I said, this was taken on a recent test shoot, so we really wanted to get that kind of fresh look, the dewy look with the skin, and Gracie, the model, had the most perfect skin for a skincare shoot. She had freckles, which was great, and I'm really hoping to bring that out a little bit more in this image overall. So I think that is one really important thing to look at when you are retouching skincare imagery, is the highlights that we're looking at in the image. So around this area and on the cheekbones, the nose, the chin, we really want to keep them intact, and you want to keep that fresh, dewy look with most skincare shots. So that's what we're going to focus on keeping intact today, and we are going to focus on keeping the overall image looking quite natural. I really don't want to see too much over retouching with this. I want to be able to see the pores. The pores should be very visible. I think that's another important point to make when you're retouching skincare images. And we're just going to do a general tidy up. It's actually going to be a lot more minimal than what you might think at first, but I'm going to go through the steps now with you guys and show you how I would dodge and burn this image. So that is actually the first step of this image. We're going to get our dodge and burn layers up. So I do have a dodge and burn tutorial. If you haven't checked that out, I will put that in the description box below. But the way that I like to create my dodge and burn layers is by creating a new layer. And this is just an empty blank layer, and I'm going to rename this one to healing. I'm then going to grab a curves adjustment layer. So that's just in this panel here. So we're going to go up to curves, and we're going to create our dodge layer first. So we're going to drag this bar up so it's nice and bright, and then hold down Control and I. I'm going to rename that layer dodge. And then I'm going to do the same thing again with the curves adjustment layer, but this time I'm going to bring the bar down so it's quite dark. And then holding down Control and I to invert again, I'm going to rename that one burn. So there we have it. Those are our dodge and burn layers right there. So as I go over dodge and burn most of the time in a lot of my tutorials these days, I'm not going to go too in depth with this. Dodging and burning is just adding a bit of light and darkness to the image, particularly the skin tone. And the way we're going to work on this is by starting on the skin tone today. And I'm actually going to start with the healing layer here. So what I like to do first is just grabbing the spot healing brush tool most of the time. I like to remove any little blemishes, pimples, stray hairs, or extra eyebrow hairs as well. And if there's any makeup that's creasing, I might try and remove that as well. So I'm just going to start removing just a few of the pimples. Not that there's many at all here. I'm just going to get rid of some of the little bumps. And just some of the hairs here as well. We want the eyebrows to look quite natural in this shot still, but just tidying them up a little bit. And I usually just like to run that over quickly. And then I'm going to go down. And any little bumps here, there's really not much at all that we do have to remove with this layer. Most of the skin tone can be evened out a little bit with Dodge and Burn. I am going to just zoom into the eyelids though, because I can see that there's just a little bit of foundation that's actually creased just in the eyelids. So usually for a lot of skincare imagery, there is actually a little bit of foundation. The makeup is quite natural though, so usually with the foundation, I always tend to discuss with the makeup artist prior to the shoot, and we make sure that the foundation looks more no makeup, if that makes sense. So basically you want the blemishes still showing through the foundation. You don't want the foundation to cover too much at all, and especially if the model has freckles or moles or anything that you want to stand out in a photo, you don't want that to be removed. So that tends to be the discussion that I do have with makeup artists. But you can see just in this area that there is a little bit of creasing from the makeup. So I'm just going to run the spot healing brush tool over that. And just until we've sort of removed that bit of creasing. Okay, so we've just removed a couple of extra little bumps, and now I think we can move straight on to dodging and burning. There's really not much else that we have to touch there. Gracie does have great skin to begin with, so that's why we want to keep these adjustments to a minimum. So going to the dodge layer here, I'm going to bring up my brush. So just on the side here, the paintbrush tool, keeping it quite soft and then making the size of it probably a bit smaller. I'd say probably for this image, maybe around 50. Keeping the flow to 1% because we want this to be very, very soft as we apply it to the skin tone, and making sure that white is the selected color. Okay, so now we're going to start doing our dodging, and we have to remember to both dodge and burn with this image. If you dodge too much, you will end up lightening the skin tone a little bit too much, and you'll also end up making it look a little bit strange and overly light. We do want to create that depth by using the burn tool as well, but I'll show you guys when I do switch over to the burn tool as well. So I'm just going to start on the cheekbone, just around the eyes, filling in any little uneven spots in the skin tone, and I'm just doing this very lightly. So keep it very light. We just want to brighten up the under eyes just a little bit and even out this part of the skin tone. Just filling in some of the smile lines just slightly at the sides. And we're actually going to bring some of these freckles just back as well, because it is hard to create that evenness with the skin tone whilst also retaining the freckles sometimes. I'm going to go over the eyelid, brighten that up as well. And I'm going to be careful not to touch the highlight too much because it is good as it is, and I don't want to extend it too much into an area that isn't typically highlighted. I just want to make sure that the highlight looks pretty even, and then I'm going to leave the rest of it pretty much alone. And I'm just going to switch over to burning as well now, just to make sure we're creating that depth on the side of the face. So I want to show you guys a quick before and after of what that has actually done. So this is the before and that is the after. So we're really just kind of removing some of the temporary imperfections and then just lightening up the areas that need to be lightened. So I'm going to keep doing this for the rest of the skin tone, and you guys can either skip ahead or watch along. I am going to speed this part up though, because otherwise we would be here for about 3 hours. So I'm going to continue doing this with the rest of the skin tone and you guys can see the end result. Okay, so we've finished with most of the skin tone now, so I'm going to zoom out and show you guys what that has done. So just going to do a before and after here. This was the original, and now this is the after. So what we're going to do now is focus on the eyebrows and the lips a little bit more in terms of the retouching. And I'm also just going to go across the skin tone again and just remove any little specks that I can see that I don't want in the image, and just kind of get rid of those first, just to perfect the skin tone overall. So just again with the spot healing brush on the healing layer and just running over any little hairs or specks. Okay, so now we are going to, as I said before, just focus a little bit more on the eyebrows. I'm just going to go to the burn layer over here, grab my paintbrush tool again on the side, and same settings for the brush. I'm just actually going to burn in parts of the eyebrow just to make them appear a little bit more fuller. Just in those little areas where there's a few gaps. And I'm not going to bother drawing any eyebrow hairs in here like I have in previous tutorials, because I feel that Gracie's eyebrows are full enough, and we do want to have that very natural effect being a skincare kind of image. So just flicking on the burn layer there and off, I can see that that's made quite a difference on the eyebrows, which is what we wanted. I'm also just going to quickly work on the lips. There's not too much to do here as we want them to look pretty natural as well, but I'm just going to grab the burn tool and just kind of fill in the little spots here where there does seem to be a little bit of a gap in coloring. And I'm just going to fill that in just at the bottom there as well, just to even it out a little bit more in the lips. Okay, and I'm just going to run the burn tool as well, just over the eyelashes. As I said, this is pretty minimal editing for beauty retouching. We're not actually going too far into doing dodging and burning here. We just want to kind of give it that natural bare effect. So just running over the eyelashes to make them a little bit darker. And the last finishing touch that I want to do with more of the local dodging and burning is actually bringing the freckles through a little bit more. So we're going to do this with the burn layer. Same brush settings, but this time I'm going to make the brush size just a little bit smaller and start just light-handedly creating little freckles over the darker spots already, just so they stand out a little bit more, and over the nose as well. Because we do so much dodging over the cheekbones, especially in where the highlights are, freckles do tend to get lost quite often, and it's hard to distinguish them sometimes from a blemish and when you're evening the skin tone out. So it is always good to kind of like bring them back a little bit if you can. We're just gonna continue on the other side as well. And just light-handedly over the cheek as well. So I'm going to turn off the burn tool so you can see how we've brought those freckles back just a little bit more and created that little bit more texture on the skin. And you can see with the skin as well that you can see that the pores are still intact. I haven't touched those, and I'm not zooming in very far. I don't want to get rid of all the pores on the skin tone and all of the texture. It's still remaining intact, and that's what we want overall for a skincare image, especially. So I'm going to zoom out again. And this time we are going to do a bit of global dodging and burning. So we've done our local dodging and burning a bit closer up. This time I'm going to stay on the burn layer first off, and I'm going to make the brush size a lot bigger, and we're going to start to burn just the areas where there are already shadows, just to create that depth still, and those mid-tones as well. It's important not to do this over areas that are not already shadowed or a slightly darker tone, because it's going to start to look a bit funny if you do that. And same thing with the dodge tool. I'm going to go over the highlights a little bit. Okay, so I want to give you guys a before and after now of the skin. So that is the before. And that is the after. So we've really kept the texture and everything intact there. What I'm actually going to do to make even more of the texture intact, I'm going to go to the dodge layer here, and I'm going to bring the opacity down just a bit. So I usually like to bring it down to around like the 75% mark. And that actually just helps bring a little bit more of the texture through even more so. Sometimes if you feel like you've gone a little bit overboard with dodge and burn or with editing, it's good to be able to just kind of pull it back a bit. And I'm going to do the same thing with the burn tool, although I'm going to move it down just to around 80%. Now we have done our dodging and burning. That is all good to go. Now I really want to start on the color grade. So a color grade for skincare, I tend to feel is usually very simple. And I think the reasons for that are you want to keep the skin tone color corrected and basically with the right tone. So I want to create a really simple color grade, and by doing this I'm actually going to start off with my black and white layer. So I do tend to use this mainly for texture. It does add a little bit more depth to the skin tone when you're doing color correction. So I'm going to bring up the black and white layer now and select the blending mode to luminosity. And I'm going to bring down the yellows and the reds because, as you guys probably know already, that tends to affect the skin tones more so. So I'm just going to bring that down a little bit, and then I might even just lower the opacity just on it a little bit, maybe to around 65, 66. Then I'm going to bring up another black and white layer, and I'm actually just going to bring the opacity right down to around 7%. And by adding that black and white layer, it just desaturates the other layer that we've put on, because it does tend to, although it does tend to bring a lot of the texture back, it does tend to make the skin tone look quite reddish. So we do want to bring that back. And then my next step would be to just make the highlights pop even more. So I'm going to go into the channels, and to do this I use luminosity masks. So by holding down Control and clicking on RGB, you'll actually select all of the brightest areas of the image. That gives you a really good selection to work with when you're adjusting highlights. So I'm going to go back to layers now and create a new adjustment layer that's levels. I'm then going to bring the highlights across, and it's just affecting the brightest parts of the image, which is great. That's exactly what we want. So just to show you guys a before and after there, that is what that layer has done. I'm then going to go to selective color and bring up an adjustment layer for that. And then I'm going to go to the whites, neutrals, and blacks and use those mainly, as they do adjust most of the image. So I'm going to go to the neutrals first, and I'm going to just play around with the sliders a little bit. So I'm going to move it over a little bit more to the warmer side, to the yellows. And might just move that down a bit with magentas. I'm then going to go to the whites and experiment with how the highlights look. I'm going to keep the highlights quite cool actually. I do tend to do that a lot with my images. Okay, and then we're going to go to the blacks, and then we're going to adjust more of the shadows in the image. And I'll just go back to the neutrals again. Just make a couple more adjustments there. Now I'm going to go to the reds, because this does tend to affect the skin tone quite a bit, and I'm going to bring the magentas down just a little bit, and the yellows down just a little bit as well, just to take away that saturation. Okay. So that is what the selective color has done. It's actually just corrected the skin tone a little bit more. Now I'm going to bring up a curves layer, because I really want this image to be bright and dewy. So I want to really just make it a bit brighter. And by doing that, I'm just going to drag the line up. Just to about there. So you guys can see that adds that really nice brightness to it. And now I'm going to just choose a solid color, really, just to use as my main color grade or source of a color grade. I'm just going to start with any color, and I'm going to actually just change the blending mode to soft light and bring down the opacity quite a bit. And we'll double click on the color again, and we're just going to experiment with what looks good on this skin tone. So I actually think quite a nice warm color looks really good with this skin tone and just with the skincare kind of style shot. So I am going to choose like a warm brown color and click OK, and then I'm just going to move the opacity down a little bit more just because I don't want it to be too strong. And taking another snapshot, I just want to see what we are dealing with the color grade. So that is kind of what we've changed it to. So I really feel like this is a good start for a skin tone color grade. You don't want it to be too heavy or take away from the skin tone too much. So I'm pretty happy with that coloring already. And the last finishing touch that I'm going to do is actually by creating a high pass filter for the sharpen of the image. So I'm going to drag the background layer into the new layer button, go to filter, other, high pass, and keeping the radius probably around 6, let's just say for now. And then going to overlay as the blending mode. You can see that really sharpens the image up, although I'm going to bring down the opacity just a little bit because we don't want it too sharp. But we'll bring it down just a little bit there. So now for a full before and after shot. So this was the before image, and this is the after. So this is how I would really edit a skincare image. I really want it to be fresh. I really want the pores to stand out, the texture to stand out in the image. And I do want the smile lines still there. I don't want to remove everything from the skin tone. I want those individual marks to show through, like the freckles and the pores. So I do recommend when you are editing skincare images to keep that in mind, and just to make sure that you are doing a very natural effect with the images, because that's usually what clients will want. They want to see basically a natural skin tone showing through. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and watching me edit this image. If you would like me to do more tutorials like this, where it's more so a kind of edit with me process, where you sort of see how I edit images from start to finish, please let me know. I am planning on doing a model portfolio retouching tutorial very soon, and how I would usually retouch model portfolio images. And I'm also thinking about doing a macro photography one. So if you guys do want to see that, please let me know. And if you have any other requests, please leave them in the comments section below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye!